Serious. Redditors who witnessed a murder, what is your story? I was at the grand opening of a sports bar the night that Manny Pacquiao fought Chris Algieri. The bar was jam-packed beyond belief, so packed that you couldn't get back to your table without shimmying through the other patrons, trying not to put your butt on the back of their necks. Anyway, a guy who had paid, entered, and had some drinks went outside to take a smoke break. No smoking allowed in the bar. There was still an incredibly long line to get inside, so he tried to come back in the exit door. The bouncer told him he couldn't and that he would have to wait in line and come back in the main entrance, though he didn't have to pay again. The guy was pissed and tried to push past the bouncer. The bouncer eventually pushed him out the door and locked it. The guy then apparently went back home, grabbed his girlfriend's gun and came back to the bar. I learned this after the fact talking to the owner and via news coverage. He waited until someone left out the exit door, snuck inside and shot the bouncer in the back of the head several times. The bar was so packed that chaos ensued. Almost everyone hit the floor immediately. There were tables, food, drinks, keys, phones and people all laying on the floor. Other people ran outside. My buddies and I waited for a few minutes until we knew the coast was clear and then got the hell out of there. At the time, we didn't know all of what had happened. As we exited the bar, we literally had to step over the dead bouncer to get to the door. I was lucky enough to find my phone and keys amid the melee. One of my buddies found his keys, but not his phone. He never got it back. Sadly, that sports bar never really recovered from that incident. It closed down for about a month before reopening. But it never achieved the popularity that it should have due to that incident. Worked in a pub when I was younger. Walking around cleaning tables and emptying ashtrays. Back in the days you could smoke indoors. And a couple of guys are standing at a high table talking. Another guy comes in and starts shouting with one of the group, getting a bit heated, so I go over to ask them to calm it down and remove all empty glasses and bottles from the area. As I'm talking to them, the lone guy lunges with a knife, misses me but goes in the chest of the other. He moves into a bear hug with the guy he just stabbed and continues to stab him a further 14 times in the back before running out the building. Spent what seemed like hours putting pressure on the stab wounds waiting for an ambulance, but the guy was dead before they got there. Police caught the guy. I gave a statement and spent a few days in court giving evidence and helping get the guy jailed. Not something I ever want to experience again, as it fucked me up for quite some time. I was riding my bike to work when I witnessed this attack. I was the first person to approach and I was sure this woman was going to die. I heard the truck before I looked, and I watched as she was run over completely with the truck. I watched as both sets of tires ran her over. It was and is the most horrible thing I have witnessed in my life. I was probably 100 to 150 feet away, and as soon as he pulled away I had to have an internal argument with myself about approaching, like I didn't want to see a dead mangled person up close, but if there was any chance she was still alive I didn't want her to be alone. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like forever, and then I went over. She was alive, and conscious. I tried to comfort her and started calling 911, but she only spoke Spanish, so I wasn't able to really communicate with her. Another woman had seen as well, and she came running over from across the street. She was able to come over and talk with her in Spanish while I called 911. I think she was able to help her call some family, since I think we were all uncertain if the woman would live. The ambulance showed up pretty quickly and stabilized her. After she was taken away, I went to work and tried not to think about it. I actually actively avoided learning anything about the story until now, because the uncertainty of whether she died or not allowed me to believe she was okay. I didn't want to know if she died. This post actually prompted me to look up whether she lived or not, and this is the first time I've even tried to look up anything about that day. I'm happy she made it, and I hope she's doing well. Seeing someone try to kill someone changes you. I don't think about that day every day, but it definitely haunts me. At a pub about 2 years ago. Large group out the front arguing, then a guy got blindsided and punched in the side of the head. The guy that hit him sprinted off into the darkness. The guy went down and never got up. His wife watched it happen and was trying to get him to wake up while the fighting and arguing continued. 30 minutes go by and the guy hasn't moved since being punched. Bar staff have been doing CPR on him for about 15 minutes before emergency services finale arrive and continue. Turns out he was brain dead on impact. They kept him alive somehow until the morning but turned life support off the following afternoon. The guy was 46, at his local bar and got killed. Heaps shit thing to see, you'll never forget that night. The guy that hit him was 19, got charged with murder and is in jail as we speak. Edit: some people are wondering why he got charged with murder and not manslaughter. In Australia, we have a thing called coward punch laws. Basically, if you blindside someone or king hit them, you get charged with murder, 8 years minimum. Personally, I believe he deserved a murder charge. Watching that man go limp and hit the ground and the attacker running away was one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. He came up behind him and punched the guy above his ear. He had no idea it was coming. Pretty much instantly made him brain dead in front of his wife. No sympathy for the attacker here. Was working in the off-campus residences at my university. Over Christmas break, when most of the students had gone home, I was still there keeping an eye on the place. I was in my little office that was in one of the apartment blocks, when I heard a pop. 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 Pop noise. It really just sounded like some kids were letting off some small fireworks in the stairwell or something. I looked out of my office window, which was just outside of the bottom of the stairwell, facing south, to see if I could see what was up. As I looked out, 3 to 4 dudes come running down the stairs and take off running to the east toward the complex entrance. About 10 seconds later, another dude comes down the stairs and slowly walks off toward the southwest. I went outside to check and see if / what damage had been caused by the fireworks, and went up the stairwell. As I got to the top, there was no fireworks debris or smoke or anything, but I saw a cell phone lying on the ground, and a single small hole in the wall outside the door of one of the units. At the other end of the corridor, there was another stairwell, and at the bottom of that there was an old beater car, just idling with the headlights on and a few of the doors just hanging open. Something was definitely fishy about it. I definitely had the "what if those were gunshots" thought, but there was no gunpowder smell or blood or anything besides that one little hole. To play it safe, I called the cops, who said they were sending someone over. The station is very close to the housing complex, and they were there in less than a minute. I gave them a quick summary of what I saw, and they split up to go in the directions I told them that the people had headed. Was less than 30 seconds later that they found the lone guy that had gone off to the southwest. Turns out he had been shot multiple times, and had managed to walk across the parking area and turn behind a building before collapsing on the grass. They tried CPR, but when the ambulance arrived, the paramedics pronounced him dead on the scene. The other cops who had gone east did find the other guy and arrested them. I ended up having to go testify in court during the trial of the guy that was supposedly the shooter. I told them basically what I wrote up here, but didn't know any of the people involved and never saw faces or anything of any real help to the police. I think I was basically there to establish timeline or something like that. Anyhow, I heard that it was basically a drug deal gone wrong. 2 different gangs from 2 different counties thought the residents' apartments would be empty over the holidays and set up a deal. One party tried to rip off the other party and someone got shot. As I understand it, the shooter guy got sent to prison. A drunk man was pushed down some stairs by the bouncer. Unfortunately, the drunk man was unable to catch himself and instead spun around and landed on the pavement with the back of his head making first contact. He was alive for a little while but quickly succumbed to his wound and arrested on the pavement. He was declared dead 15 minutes later in ED after being transported by ambulance. There was no CCTV or clear evidence of malicious intent that would hold up in court, and the man was known as a drunk and had no friends or family. It was ruled an accidental death. I had to walk past that spot most days going to work and will never forget his face, the look of mystified horror, followed by the glassy-eyed slack-jawed expression that come with death. I was the medic that transported the man. I was by his side from start till the declaration. One of the most visceral experiences of my career thus far. Was walking home one day and saw a couple arguing. The dude started walking off away from the girlfriend's car, and apparently she was not happy with that. She proceeded to get in the car and wait about 5 minutes till he was way off down the sidewalk. I was walking on the opposite side of the road as him, and all of a sudden I see a blur and he goes flying like a rocket. She must have been going at least 60 miles per hour. He flew through the air and hit a tree. Died instantly. The women then screamed out the window at his body and drives away. There was blood smeared all over the crumpled hood, and I'll never forget the sight of his contorted body at the base of the tree. Almost folded in half. I had to talk to the police, and within the hour they caught her at a car wash, trying to clean the blood and chunks off the hood and grille of her car. I was 16 at the time. I was 16 driving down the highway in the passenger seat of my mom's car, about 3:30 p.m. Traffic came to a complete halt and we were in the right-hand lane. So as we're creeping along, a semi-truck appears on the shoulder of the highway, doors swung wide open. As we move past, there is a trail of blood down the doorstep onto the concrete and then leading about 20 feet further down the road. As we crept further, the trail of blood ended with a man lying face up completely covered in blood. There were no police or ambulances there yet. This was on a highway in the suburbs of a major metropolitan area in the US, so plenty of people saw before the scene was taken hold of by emergency services. Turns out the truck driver had a partner with him. They got into an argument and the passenger stabbed the driver like a dozen times and then escaped. The murderer was caught about an hour and a half away, one state over, 2 days later. I have to imagine that I was about 5 minutes behind the truck pulling over because the police can be in that spot in about 30 seconds. Being in the passenger seat in the right lane of the highway, I was about 10 feet from the body. Haunting image. Obviously a lot of lead up to the story, but I'm not going there. My girlfriend was taking her dog for a walk while I got showered for work. I'm in the bathroom and I hear voices coming from outside. I look out the window and to my horror there is my girlfriend talking to her abusive stepfather, who is standing about 5 foot away from her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it wasn't good. Stepfather raises his shotgun, shoots my girlfriend in the face, then shoves shotgun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Murder-suicide. Life's never been the same for me since. Lots of messages, so I wanted to say this. Thank you all for the support. It was 20 years ago, and though I'll never get over it, I can live with it. It took nearly 2 years before I came to realize there was nothing I could have done to stop it. I will never forgive her family for knowing what that man was doing to her and they did nothing about it. I'm not really good with words, but I wanted to thank everyone for the kindness and support. I saw a few in Mexico. The most memorable one was the first one I saw while I lived there. I was cleaning out a house with some buddies of mine. A guy was walking down the block. We heard gunshots. I looked out the window and there was that same guy laying out on the sidewalk. A black pickup truck sped by. I think there were 4 guys on back. All with bandanas covering their faces, all with guns in their hands. The thing that stuck with me is they all looked younger than me. I was 22 at the time. According to the paper that was released right after he was from out of town and likely they mistook him as someone else, he was 17. His blood was left on the streets for days. One of my friends said he heard 14 shots, but I only heard 6. I have the whole experience written down as it was so foreign to me. This was in Altamirano. I used to stay up late at night trying to think of what kind of life would lead those guys to do a drive-by like that. I also wonder about that 17-year-old, I'm sure he had family visiting there. When I was like 13-year-old, before the drug violence of the 2010, I was living in a border state of Mexico. One day I went with some friend to the park to play soccer. In our way back to my house a Lincoln car stopped almost next to us and 2 guys got out of the car and take out of the car a dead guy and put him really close to us. This guy was a drug lord. I remember being in shock and curious. The dead man had all his jewelry on him. I remember to see the gold Rolex full of diamonds. We didn't walk away, and people started to stop to see the body. Some adults asked us to leave the scene. We walk a few meters, and another truck came. Some guys with guns get out of the truck and pick up the body. Later we saw in the news the body was thrown in another place of the city. This was shocking to me, because I was young and naive. Another case I remember was a few years ago. I got out of my house in the morning to go for work. When I got a few meters away from my house I saw a body of a guy, but it had no head. The cartel decapitated. The head was left like 3 blocks away from my house. I called the army and the Marines. For what I heard from this people, the rumors said that it was a message to a drug lord living 2 blocks from my house, because this guy worked for him as a message guy. Both cases happened in the nice and wealthiest part of the city, so if this kind of crimes happened in the safest part of the city, I could not imagine what kind of crimes the worst part of the city could have. Five years ago, there was an attempted home invasion at my house when I was 18. I was downstairs watching Top Gear when I hear somebody trying to break in the door. My father, military type, very protective, confronted the guy and the guy turned around and shot my dad in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun. My dad was able to fire off a couple shots afterwards, killing him. But my father already was on the ground dead. This is the very short version. First time writing this out. Still surreal to think about. Turned out the guy was a felon with 6 butcher knives down his pants. Presumably trying to find some reason to hurt someone. I consider my father a hero. Most people considered his actions stupid or irresponsible, local internet commenters, but you had to know him to understand his mentality. Saw my friend get shot in the head and died a few minutes later during a crossfire between her oldest brother and the police. Was very heartbreaking. I still miss her 22 years later. We were playing on a field next to her house and her brother was watching us. He pulled a gun out, started shooting as soon as he saw the police. Happened while hanging out at my bestie's house. For context, I'd like to explain that, 1, her house faced the side of a popular bar in our town, 2, that particular night her husband was pretty buzzed and had the fire pit out front blazing, and 3, they had taken in my guinea pigs in addition to theirs when I moved to a place that wouldn't allow them. So my BF at the time and I at one point go to the basement to give out treats to the piggies. Through the open side door we could hear some commotion going on outside. Didn't think much of it at first, until I realized that my inebriated could possibly be involved. BF and I run out the side door to find the husband nowhere in sight, and the commotion is coming from two guys across the street from the bar and one guy in the parking lot arguing. We go back into the basement where we found the husband. He had went inside to grab a beer and then came down the basement steps to gather more cardboard to burn while the fire pit was going, and the three of us begin to chat. Fast forward a few minutes and we all hear pop 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 pop. For a split second we all just look at each other wide-eyed, knowing those pops were unquestionably gunshots. The three of us run out the side door again just in time to see one of the guys from across the street is now in the bar parking lot, and the other guy involved in the argument shoots him 5 more times. The victim goes down and the shooter stood over him and shot him 3 more times before taking off running up my bestie street. Probably the worst part was that the victim's mom was inside the bar. Her cries were so heartbreaking to hear. Later learned that the victim lived across the street from the bar and his 2 young children ended up seeing their dad bleed out through the window. The killer was found within the hour and stated the argument was over $20 and a woman they were both trying to date. He was charged with first-degree murder and 13 counts of wanton endangerment.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.